Hi, you're listening to The Future is a Mixtape. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jesse.
We're going to have a third-party visitor. We will announce it later with weird interruptions about going to the bathroom or whatever, and blankets and sleeping on the floor. But we'll talk about this mystery agent that went inside our system, our perfectly capitalist system.
This invisible hand. Guiding the podcast.
Disruption. Exactly. So she was destroying our Great Barrier Reef here. This is, of course, my daughter, but we'll talk more about that later. Also, we're going to focus on the second part of the poison pyramid, capitalism. So this is going to be the focus.
And Matt does a dramatic reading of the world's 8 wealthiest men. Enjoy. When I was young, I only recall ever hearing one bit of life advice from my father. And he said, there are 2 ways to get rich in the world. You're either born into it or you marry into it. And son, you were not born into it.
God. Was that at the birthday party?
I don't know when that happened.
Your dad was itemizing the presents.
But that was the only bit of advice that I really recall. He may have said some other stuff to me.
That's so different than my parents.
But it's so far been true. I mean, as far as I can tell.
This just sounds like bitterness at your lack of self-will and your inability to believe in pyramid schemes. In your inability to believe in pyramid schemes. Because this is part of the pyramid scheme. This is part of the poison pyramid.
Exactly. If I just believed in it.
Yeah, hard enough.
Then I could get rich too.
Yeah, I mean,
we could all get rich.
Yeah, I mean, you're born into capitalism. I mean, there's no, that Graeber talks about this. David Graeber, the anarchist and anthropologist, talks about like you're not allowed to actually imagine anything else.
He says don't call him an anarchist anthropologist. So.
Anarchist and anthropologist.
There you go.
Because his anthropology is anarchy. But I mean, you're not allowed to. This is in a Baffler article, and it's also in a YouTube talk that he gave on bureaucratic technologies. He said the problem is you're not allowed to actually imagine anything outside of capitalism. You're punished for it, and you don't have the surplus time to actually talk about it because you're just so built around this, this caged maze when there's no exits.
Well, I think you're jumping ahead a little bit, Matt. We didn't set this up. I want to be 60 minutes of thrusting. You just want to get right to it.
Exactly.
Well, just to get us back to where we left off last week in the conversation, this probably will be considered part 2 of a 3-part
poison pyramid.
Yeah, sort of series to open up the podcast here. Last week, we introduced this idea that you're calling the poison pyramid, where I offered the notion that there are these 3 big structures, these 3 social structures, these 3 ideological structures in the world.
Or just mythologies.
These mythologies in the world that are prohibiting us from enacting any meaningful change and creating any type of future that might benefit us all.
And that are seismically irrational.
Oh, yes.
Given to earthquakes.
Absolutely.
Given to earthquakes and cognitive
Well,
dissonance.
these 3 things that I offered up here in this idea set was 1, religion. And we talked a little bit about that and how that fit into this notion of things that would prohibit us from building a better future. 2, capitalism, which our intention is to talk about that on this episode. And 3rd, celebrity, which we have some disagreement about, but the next episode I think we'll dive into that. But the task for today is to
explore the dark chambers of the market. Yeah.
A little excessive.
Kaiju monster.
So you made a point last week when we were talking about religion that they, or actually when we were talking about these 3 things,
they're chronological.
They are chronological too, and that's also like I think I'm warming up to your phraseology of the poison pyramid because it's an. I mean,
well, we need really alliteration. It's cute. We need alliteration.
I don't know how cute it is, but
well, you don't want to call it just this shape called something that has 3 points on it. It involves religion and capitalism, celebrity. You have some poetry here.
Yeah.
Have some poetry here.
Well, yeah, okay.
If you come up with something on our third podcast on celebrity, we'll move the dial. But right now, I own this shit. It's the poison pyramid. Okay. I squatted on your idea.
Good. Squatters. They're allowed.
Oh, yes. We can talk about the diggers. Exactly.
So, yeah, that these are built upon each other, right? So the idea is that not only are all of these sort of mythological, one, they don't have, I think one thing they all share in common we were talking about is that they're not inherent in the natural world. Like these aren't natural phenomena. These are idea systems and, accordant institutional structures.
And behavioral science and psychology is increasingly finding out that this actually isn't how humans actually behave. I mean, these mythologies.
Well, and that's exactly my point is with these things, these mythologies, if you will, is that these aren't part of the natural order of the universe. These aren't like planets or even us as animals. These are things that we've created. These are structures that we've built, and they don't square up with our reality.
I think the best example of this is when you look into sociology, there's an area of study within sociology called disaster studies. And Rebecca Solnit, the great essayist, California folk, she has a book called Paradise Built in Hell. And what she talks about is when these superstructures are removed, let's say the chapel gets burnt down and the city gets burnt to rubble, or there's an earthquake. She talks about these disaster zones where when these hierarchies are removed from social settings, that people are fundamentally anarchist, they're horizontal, they're egalitarian. And she talks movingly in I don't know if it was a Slate or a Salon article, but about, maybe it was a Truth Out, that she said that, when Robert Gates, who was under both the Bush administration and also Clinton administration, when the Haiti earthquake happened, he didn't believe that they should do airdrops of food. Now, if you're a sociologist and you study disasters, you know exactly what happens when you airdrop food. People fucking share it. So within a 48-hour period, those airdrops happen. People genuinely trust each other. So it's not Hunger Games. It's not like 28 weeks later. They actually trust each other. And so what actually happened was, being part of the state trusts the state. So Robert Gates actually gave that food that should have gone directly to regular folks in Haiti after the devastating earthquake. It went to the state, and the state gobbled it up and hoarded it. They kept it in trucks. It was just basically, some of it actually just spoiled in warehouses because of what Rebecca Solnit calls elite panic.
Like I think what you're getting at here is that the assumptions in capitalism about quote unquote human nature are not accurate. These are false assumptions.
Yes.
Right.
It's another religion.
Left to our own devices, we actually would tend to cooperate.
Yeah. I mean, and Rebecca Solnit mentions in Paradise Built in Hell that, after 72 or 3 or 4 days, it'll turn into, this survival of the fittest, and garbage will rise and violence will accrue. But within normative constraints, when people are desperate and they're not starving to death, they actually are amazingly socialist.
Yeah. Well, I think what we share in our perspective here, and why we've really found common ground about this sort of notion and what we're calling the poison pyramid.
This is the part that we agree 100%.
100% is that these ideological institutions, these three forces, have no basis in reality, right? That they are full of inaccurate or just flat out wrong assumptions about human need, about the nature of the human condition, and are altogether mythological.
And you're told, well, just wait. And you say, I'm hurting. And we'll say, well, it's going to happen. Don't worry. It's going to happen for you.
Right.
The Willy Wonka ticket's going to happen.
Right. And like we mentioned before, that they're all the core to all three of these notions, for me at least, is that they all involve as an essential component of their operation, their existence in the world, systems of hierarchy.
Yes.
Right. And this is what connects all three of them, that these mythological sort of structures that impose upon human activity these unnecessary systems of hierarchy.
And I think it's important we should say as a side note that mythology itself isn't bad if it's produced for art or awareness or to think in terms of cognitive stories or stories.
Stories are great.
Yes.
Fiction's great. We're going to talk about
these are mythologies that reify hierarchy and unjust relations. So I think that's the difference between, let's say, fables and mythologies that allow for cognitive estrangement and fanciful thinking and outside of the box pondering. These are things that are meant for social control.
Right. And that these things are sort of, in my imagination or in my understanding of them, at least, built on top of each other. That human culture got off on the wrong foot by inventing religion. That this is, that as we discussed last time, this is a seed for all these other
irrational forms of thinking.
Right. Irrational forms of thinking and false ideas or ill-informed ideas about relationships, how relationships between human beings ought to be structured, how social structures ought to be shaped, what the societies ought to look like. And so in the relationship of these, religion is the first one, the first step, and the wrong step. The first step in the wrong direction to lead us towards oblivion, off the cliff that we're getting ever closer towards.
The gun to the head of Mother Earth.
Yeah, was making up some mythical beings that explained everything in the universe.
And then became used strategically for...
Right, became used strategically for all kinds of...
Cruelties
and violence. I think what I wanted...
Oh, there's an article, an interview with a guy named... he wrote a book called One Nation Under God. His name is Kevin Kruse, and he basically... I mean, when we talked about religion for our last podcast, but I think one way of thinking about this is that religion never completely separated itself from capitalism at any particular point. We still have the basis underneath it. So Kevin Kruse has a book, like I said, called One Nation Under God, and it documents how from the 1930s that the steam engines of the capitalist class were anxious and angry about having the New Deal take over, and they essentially wanted to find some way to move back the dial to the pre-New Deal, and were upset by trade unionism, upset by the power of organized unions, which were much, much higher than they are now. I mean, of course, it really helps when you didn't have, the technology that allowed for global trade to press against workers, against different nations. And so what happened was they were hitting a wall because the cynicism, the self-awareness of the social controls from the 1% was so apparent for people that had suffered under the Great Depression. I mean, we're talking like literally, not until 1939, 1940. I mean, you had...
Well, and so much of modern economics, like John Maynard Keynes, was writing about the Depression and how to, theoretically get out of it.
And while Keynes didn't directly read Karl Marx, he read Minsky and others that were influenced by Karl Marx. And so that bled into much of the attempts of what, Keynes said is the best of all worst systems. So he, said, look, he saw the limits and the problems of it. And even afterwards, he had speculated that, by 2000, we would be working 15 hours a week, right? So that the productivity rates would be so...
Of course we're not. Yeah.
Which he was quite accurate on the productivity rates, actually. I mean, if you actually look at the graphs, he was quite accurate on the thousands of percent productivity rates. But what didn't happen was the less work and more pay. And so what happened is fundamentally is that many of these architects of big industry and steel and Chrysler and GM and all these industries started to basically organize themselves around religion because their rhetoric was so obvious that it wasn't working. It was just there's no power to it. And it was basically
started to refer to religion.
It was it was as blunt and obvious as the Soviet Union telling everybody they live in a beautiful society, and it was obvious to everyone that they were being lied to. But so they needed some way to outsource that, and so Kevin Kruse talks about this in One Nation Under God, where they basically talked about how fundamentally that they looked for preachers to propagate in a relationship that was parallel to religion, which is if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're wealthy, you're being rewarded by God for your success.
Right.
And that parallel construction allowed for them to go to areas where they would normally not be listened to. And by
what do you mean areas?
Well, like working class constituents, working class communities, folks of color, even. Yeah, I mean,
talk to folks.
Absolutely. And so people that would normally be New Dealers, people that would normally be opposed to the 1% that had saw their lives destroyed by bankers and
in the 30s, the wealth disparity wasn't like it is now. So it wasn't 1% owning 50% of the globe's wealth like it is today.
The crux of the point is that Reverend James Fifield, who was basically the pastor for Cecil B. DeMille on the Hollywood set, he basically started to create the phrasings that ended up becoming adopted by a lot of these wealthy citizens who said, well, this is something great here. We can actually reroute the old energies of capitalism back to us, and all the wealth can go back to us. And so he used phrases like spiritual mobilization, and then essentially all these organizations like National Association of Manufacturers, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Sun Oil, Alfred Sloan of General Motors, they start organizing around this Christian libertarian message. And basically said the New Deal is essentially evil. It's a manifestation of socialism that's out of control. It's going to take us away from our origins, which is weird because, when they started to insert things like One Nation Under God or In God We Trust in the 50s during the Eisenhower era, and that was an attempt to actually ground an ideology, a false, folk politics. And so Francis Bellamy, who actually wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, he was a Christian socialist and a Baptist who believed in the separation of church and state. And here they're taking the Pledge of Allegiance and tacking this on, on the reverse of Martin Luther tacking something on the door, right? So, And so fundamentally what ended up happening was they're building a semiotic network through religion to drive a visceral moment, right? Because religion is so visceral for people.
Right.
And their anxiety about death is so paramount that by using the language and the poetry of the Bible, they were able to reroute these dark energies back to the essential irrationality of religion, which people might have been distrustful of capitalism after seeing it literally blow up in their face in a material sense, but religion had clung on.
Right.
And that irrational thing was moved back to another irrational energy, which is capitalism. So this project is large.
I think the point that I get from that is that not only does the notion of religion itself, as we've been discussing, provide a sort of path for which systems like capitalism then sprout up and evolve in the world, they also then get reincorporated into the justifications of the continuance and the growth of these systems.
Well, we saw this with the Great Recession, right? Religious terms were being used, right? The idea of honor, when even in 9/11, right? That the kind of religious duty to shop,
right? Capitalism is a mixtape too, right?
Exactly.
And part of that mixtape is all of the hopes and fears and fantasies that religion spoke to, and so I think it's also easy to make an analogy between an economic system as capitalism might be considered, but more so, and I'll get to that in a second, but that it does function like a religion. Yeah. It seems to me pretty clearly that it promises the same sort of things that religion does.
Yeah.
Right? And it gives the same sort of prescriptions for one's life. I think, and why it's become so deeply rooted is not only because of the good fortunes that have befell the system, right, in terms of technological production and so forth, but that it's become such a dominant system that there's no alternative, right? You don't question that, like, there's nothing.
The Calvinists had this really, incredibly powerful and strident opinion that there was a limited space for heaven. And, with capitalism, there's also a limited space for heaven, which is becoming wealthy. And so for every rags to riches story that's brought out, no one ever bothers to show you the statistical possibility that you're going to be the next Oprah Winfrey or the next $23 million President Obama. So the idea is that the rags to riches tale is also based on this kind of limited notion of utopia. We can give you utopia, but
exactly.
It's going to be limited.
That's just as we discussed before with religion, that it gives you a promise of a better future, like a utopian sort of existence to look forward to. So does capitalism. Well, like you gotta be rich.
And this is the thing: is markets were viewed as a utopian alternative to the idea of feudalism. So it was going to democratize this age-old system of religious monarchical hierarchies, and we'll have these ingenuity. We'll democratize ideas, and so it won't just be in the noble class where people have access to education. I mean, Adam Smith, of course, talks about very powerfully the importance of public education, creating that system of public education to broaden the potential for ingenuity and creativity. So it's weird when you talk to right libertarians now, they have those same ideals about markets, but the markets are almost feudalist. They're not democratizing anybody.
Right. The whole notion of neoliberalism seems as this incredible militaristic sort of insistence upon the righteousness of markets.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That the markets will solve everything, that the answer is always in the market, and an insistence on unregulated, unfettered markets.
Well, and where Wealth of Nations becomes the Bible, right? I mean, that ideas of Wealth of Nations no longer is something that could be talked with in terms of the material circumstance. So we can actually see how markets that were described by Adam Smith are not the markets we have, and the corporations are like religious churches. I mean, they operate as feudal entities. So we can talk about the enclosure movement, right, which is the idea that at least land in a feudal system was under the direct control of God. So even though there was a monarchy, the monarchy was kind of the steward of God's land. That's an interesting thing because there's some responsibility to workers in some weird backward sense because the monarchy is the steward of God's property. And with the enclosure process that occurred, which, the documentary, the corporation talks about, the enclosure movement basically starts the property. And you talk to libertarians, and when they think of property, they have no class analysis. They have no idea about how property accrued. They think that unlimited access to property for people is more freedom. And what we're happening is a kind of a return to some of these kinds of feudalist states, not actually a market. And so they think that property is something that I earned all the time, and that whoever has this wealth or this land, they earned it from day one. And they don't talk about the violence that was perpetuated by First Nations or anyone else. Vast indigenous,
and a key component of this the neoliberal position and its religious sort of adherence to the value of competition in open, unregulated markets is that.
It assumes that those markets will stay tight, excited. There'll be plenty of other opportunities and new markets forming within markets. But if you actually look at the banking industry, if you look at the agricultural sector, if you look at almost the airline industry, we're seeing massive consolidations. So you could call it corporate communism, but essentially, 5 companies dominate most of the media markets, and when you look at, you got Kraft and Monsanto, you have a very narrowed idea of competition, and they will themselves on the state to get and extract their profits.
Well, that's what I think generally.
That's a mythology.
Right, that's a mythology. But I think it's generally probably well accepted that it's not exclusively an economic system. And I don't think it's really accurate to think of it as just an economic system. Because it's not really that.
It's not a science.
I don't think it's that at all, really. I think what it is a manifestation of ideas that, like we discussed, are largely, inherited through
religious columns
about human nature.
Well, and this belief that the market will work it out. If people want it, they'll pay for it. That the market's the decider. It's kind of weird because it almost sounds like the market is a god that will decide these things for you. And the invisible hand. Well, whose hand is it? Jesus or God, or where's the other hand? What's that jerking off?
Right. There's this insistence. Hayek and Friedman and all of these
Montpelier Institute,
right? All and the Reagan Thatcher sort of establishment of neoliberalism.
Well, let's step back. Where's the other invisible hand? If there's the other invisible hand is destroying workers' rights and sacrificing against and on the biosphere's sustainability.
Right. But what I'm saying is that the belief is that capitalism is the best to have evolved or to have developed in human history, and from their argument, the best that we could ever hope for in terms of a system for allowing for, enabling the insurance of the well-being of human beings, right? That there's no other way to have a prosperous world outside of the system. Like, that's the argument.
And don't complain.
Yeah, because if you complain, you're wrong and you're stupid.
Whatever we do else will be worse.
Exactly. And I want to play you a few things. We have this little playlist of YouTube videos that sort of gives the gamut, because there's this.
This will be on our website?
Yeah, we'll leave a link in the show notes to this playlist. It's short, like 6 videos that run from this sort of propagandistic Prager University video, super pro-capitalist, and another one about how capitalism is so great, and then moves through the spectrum and concludes with, I think, a very cogent and well-said argument by David Harvey about the crises of capitalism that he did for RSA.
Animate.
Yeah, in 2010, dissecting the financial collapse in 2008. So let me just play you something.
The dark chambers of capitalism.
Because there's this real. Well, I think the point I wanted to make is that it seems, for all that I can remember in my life, 40 years of it, that the public discourse, the public conversation, really only it was a really black and white, and still is to this day. And I think there's implications in, the presidential election this past year that is either the choice is capitalism or socialism. Right?
False choice. False binary.
Right.
This is a logical fallacy.
Right.
It's called a false binary. There's no third way, no fourth way, no fifth way. There's just these two.
And like, socialism isn't necessarily an equivalent thing to capitalism.
Could capitalism really exist as pure capitalism? Because really,
it doesn't.
Socialism doesn't, in most cases, exist entirely as
right.
Socialism.
This is the evolution and the give and take over, the couple hundred years that it's really been since, industrial capitalism sort of took root in the world, that it's taken all sorts of shapes, and it's an ever evolving sort of beast. And I think now we're living in a especially heightened time.
Pressure points are huge.
Right, pressure points are huge. We're seeing it come towards potentially the end of its functional purpose in the world.
Barbara Ehrenreich had said in a discussion, roundtable discussion, that Karl Marx would be shocked to discover that this ingenious economic wealth generator. And remember, Karl Marx was as horrified by capitalism as he was stunned by its ingenuity, creativity, its dynamism, its ability to produce way past what feudalism could accomplish. And he was actually marveling at this kind of thing. It's like this horrible beast, but it's powerful. And Karl Marx thought, this would be the end of scarcity. We'd have all these products and consumer things. What he didn't realize is that capitalism actually is not only overproducing, but it'll have a cliff fall where you have all kinds of scarcity.
Right. There's internal contradictions in it that you have to continually deny for it to move forward, because really it honors no limit. And right, this is the thing, like, especially about the neoliberal idea of capitalism, is that fuck limits, right? Fuck like putting any sort of restrictions on it. It should be unfettered entirely.
It's what Michael Albert called a system where garbage rises, right? The worst element. So it's actually in some ways to me scarier than religion, because religion, at least there was stewardish aspects of the idea of the earth and taking care of it. Although we can talk about the evangelicals and Harvest talking about the need for rapture and we don't care about the earth, so fuck it. But what capitalism does is it rewards the most authoritarian route in any relationship. So the more authoritarian you are, the more you're rewarded in the market. I mean, that is fucking insane. So the more psychopathic you are as an agent, as an actor, as a capitalist, as a company, you're rewarded.
Well, because the prime directive of the system is the profit motive. Right.
Profit motive.
And how you get from that to an argument
about heaven.
but how you get from a system whose main purpose is to maximize profit, really at all costs in some instances, or by any means in other instances.
This is the missing part from Fountainhead, from Ayn Rand, where where one of the children are born and the mother says, how can I extract as much profit from this child as possible?
But when is it when?
I don't want to love this child. I want it to excrete profit for me.
But when do you get to enough?
Yeah.
Like, when is enough enough?
Yeah. Well, we know fundamentally, once again, from behavioral science and psychological studies, that after $70,000 of individual income, happiness is not located by income. It's no longer the main decider. So when we talked about this before we started the podcast, is that, we have 8 people, right?
So in 2017, what you're referring to is
cat hoarders. Cat hoarders.
Cat hoarders?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, there are
I don't want
eight cat ladies.
I don't want to put my foot towards misandry, but I mean, cat ladies are hoarding all the newspapers and.
Well, Oxfam, the anti-poverty NGO, put out a report in January of this year, 2017, about the world economy, basically, in which they listed the top 8 wealthiest people in the world who own more than 40% of the poorest, on the planet.
And there's an MIT study that came out.
All men.
All men.
Bill Gates at the top with $75 billion.
And they have all the ideas we're told. Right?
What the actual fuck?
They have all the ideas, so trust them.
All of them are above 40 billion, these 8.
Where do you base
and so, okay, so, and this is thought to be, this is celebrated, right? Like this is the utopian sort of promise, right? Just as I think what I want to argue when we talk about celebrity is that it functions in a very similar way, right? That the propaganda, the story, the narrative of the culture is that it's open to anyone, right? You work hard enough, you say all your prayers and do whatever, that kind of shit. You too could become Mark Zuckerberg.
And
right?
what does that mean for you? Like, why should we be proud that you're wealthy?
Well, right.
What are you doing that's so interesting?
I mean, in this ideology, right? In the capitalist neoliberal ideology, it's seen as benign, right? That's no problem, right? It's actually valuable. It's actually valuable to work because they're quote unquote job creators.
How different is this than the blind worship of noblemen, the aristocracy? They know what they're doing. They're at the head of the train on Snowpiercer, and we'll just not go anywhere. And
how is this okay? Like, how is it okay for anyone to have, let alone $40 billion, like even $1 billion? Like, what the actual shit?
If they proposed,
what the fuck are you? What are you gonna? So sorry, it's just so baffling. Also, especially Bill Gates, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they do a lot of
shit.
Sorry,
it was my anti-capitalist Tourette's syndrome going off.
They do. There's this whole area of philanthropy and
let's talk about
charity.
the contradictions of the Bill Gates Association. So
I don't know. I don't know if we have time to talk,
I'll give you an illustration of like they are supposed to have the ideas, right? But they're the biggest drivers for Obama's administration when it came to for-profit education. And like in countries that need vaccinations, he owns stocks in companies that are polluting those children.
Well, even regardless of the effectiveness or the true altruism of their foundation's work and the money that they do give away or that he does give away, he still is gaining more wealth.
Yes.
Like he's gained since 2006 when he left Microsoft, his wealth has increased by like 25% because money makes money.
Well, and this is
like he couldn't lose money if he tried because he has so much of it that it's just.
Well, I mean, look at what happened. I mean, what are they doing with the money? I mean, if you're a philanthropist, you're supposed to get rid of it, right? And Warren Buffett's not going to get rid of it until he literally dies because he can't imagine not having it on his lap. And Carnegie Mellon, he had a nightmare where Jesus said he's going to suffer eternal damnation if he doesn't get rid of his money. And so he started building all these public libraries because he was actually frightened that there'd be some punishment for having it. But here, it's just naturally altruistic and they know what they're doing. And what I find fascinating in America is that we assume that the wealthiest people are the smartest ones and that the wealthiest people are the most creative ones. But let's look at art.
The best looking.
Oh, the best looking. But we assume all of these things are built in. But I will tell you that it's people on the margins. It's the indigenous. It's people of color. It's LGBT people. It's Muslims that are discriminated against. That this is the baseline area where fertilization of new ideas come from. It's the people on the margins. It's at the margins where we should be listening to those people. I mean, I work and meet and struggle with activists all the time.
Right.
I would much rather listen to an activist than a politician.
And this notion gets gobbled up by
peddled and repedaled
by it gets regurgitated through the markets and through the languages of persuasion. So you get the mythology of these folks. So especially in this new tech capitalism, especially in the past 20 years, right? With stories of Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and all these big tech CEOs as being real radicals, right? When they're younger, right? Yeah, I want to get on a, we've got off a little, we got a little forward here, but I want to circle back here. Yeah, so
those 8 folks.
Right. So there's 8 folks. Well, I guess I'd say that.
Want to list them? Why don't you list them for our podcast audience?
Well, we'll
top of the pops.
Here, you read.
Okay,
that.
So
we'll leave a link to this. Well, we'll leave a link to the Oxfam. What is that? A
Chambers
drum roll?
Of capitalism. Richer than ultra rich Bill Gates, Microsoft founder, $75 billion. Amatio Ortega, Spanish founder of fashion house Inditex, $67 billion. Warren Buffett, American businessman and magnate investor, $60.8 billion. Don't forget about that 0.8. He's almost to 61. Carlos Slim, who's really not Slim. Helu, Mexican business magnate, $50 billion. Own a phone company.
He's a magnet or a magnate?
Magnate. he's in rocks. Jeff Bezos, founder, chairman.
Are you auctioning
and
them
chief
off?
executive officer of Amazon.com. Let me figure out what the process is later, fucker.
I'm not sure what role you're playing. This is a professional wrestling.
I'm attempting to skull fuck them right now. So okay, $45.2 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, chairman, chief executive officer, and Facebook friend. $44.6 billion. Don't take photos of him at Thanksgiving. He could get pissed off.
Wait.
Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle Corporation, $43.60 billion. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York, $40 billion. Soda tax. That's his biggest idea, is a soda tax.
All right. So that's nice and theatrical there. Thank you. But I don't want to give the impression that,
we're going to be hunted now.
No, I don't want to give the impression that my thoughts are considering them evil at all as people. Like this is what.
Yeah, it's
they're doing
they're doing what the ideology
system
grants, and they're part of the institution. We should get upset about the we should get upset about the ideas. I mean, well, the other thing is we should get
I can't say that I wouldn't,
No, I mean, who knows what, it's Lord of the Rings. You put it on the ring for a while and see what happens to you.
And look, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife said that they're going to, give away 99% of their wealth, like over their lifetime. So, okay, we'll see what.
But it's going to go in an interesting account. We can talk about that later.
But I think the point I want to make is that it's not. I don't want to
make it about the
suggest.
people.
Yeah, it's not about the people. It's about the system, right? The problem isn't that there's evil people. Sure, they may have some ill will, perhaps, but I haven't met Bill Gates. I'm sure
they're part of an ideas that have to be left out of the mixtape.
Right. It's just that what gives rise. The thing is that what gives rise to this being a reality of our world, that there are these 8 men, mostly white men, who own more than anyone can even really imagine, and more than 40% of the poorest in the world has to be morally repulsive.
These are bad songs that have to be left out of the mixtape. So what we need people to do is not necessarily focus obsessively about the knight in shining armor, Bernie Sanders, or these bad dark Wall Streeters, but also like fundamentally say like, look, we've got some bad ideas that have to be cut really quickly. Yeah, because we're at a cliff. We're in a 4 to 6 year period.
Well, they don't want it cut because this is what they think.
But only capitalism creates a group of people known as entrepreneurs who have no choice but to concern themselves with the needs and desires of others. These others are their customers. Few economists, however,
are going to do Mystery Science 3000 on this shit.
These entrepreneurs, the creative leaders of capitalist businesses. If they did, they would discover that entrepreneurs, by the very nature of what they do, must shun greed. First and foremost,
the first thing to think about
to others is the very opposite of greed. Often it takes months,
it's not greed.
Sometimes many years to bring a new product or service to market.
Love.
Furthermore, entrepreneurs must collaborate with others, building teams to achieve their aims. In designing their goods and services, they must, once again, focus not on their own needs, but on the needs of others.
Where's the part about the Great Barrier Reef? Let's see that part.
So what entrepreneurs
the ocean looks a weird blue.
Seek profit is far more than self-interest.
Yeah.
Doing God's work.
Profit is a measure of how well a company has served others. Under capitalism, a business prospers only if customers voluntarily trade for its output.
Yeah, sure.
And it's only
because
by
it's something I need.
They're working on their legacies for 3 months before they move on to another company.
If the entrepreneur pursues his own interests first and his customers' interests second, his business will fail. And sooner or later, an altruistic entrepreneur will surpass.
Wait, what if it's too big?
Capitalism at its essence, then, is a competition of giving. Of
Capitalism is a competition of giving.
But the genius of capitalism,
it's a potluck,
and only capitalism, is that it channels self-interest into altruism. Entrepreneurs can only help themselves by helping others. Those courageous souls, the entrepreneurs who are the beating heart of capitalism, who bring us the endless material benefits we enjoy.
This is important. Endless material benefits.
No, workers didn't do shit right here.
Should be held up for admiration, not torn down. Altruism is the very reason for capitalism's existence and why it remains the hope of civilization.
No thanks. So this is a video called Why Capitalism is Great by Paul Joseph Watson. So,
make capitalism great again.
Just play a little bit of the intro and the beginning and the end of this because
smartphone to send the hashtag.
He summarizes
trending worldwide on Twitter. Here's a sample.
He's got a map behind him.
The bourgeois and their racist, sexist capitalism must be purged. Cis white males will be the first against the wall. Hashtag resist capitalism. We have enough tech innovation and resources for everyone globally to work 4 hours a week and pursue life, art, hobbies. Hashtag resist capitalism. Your employer is stealing from you every minute you're on the job. Hashtag resist capitalism.
Dear mom's basement dwelling communists.
That's you. That's you, Matt.
Hillary Clinton used the term basement dwellers.
Success. The following
There's a parallel.
would not exist. Twitter, the iPhone you're tweeting hashtag resist capitalism from, the internet.
745,000
Resist capitalism is what trends on Twitter
it's a hitter.
when 13-year-old One Direction fans try to engage in politics. Here's
got
the
an
truth
apple.
about capitalism.
Here's the truth.
It's the single greatest force in history to alleviate suffering, bring billions of people out of poverty, and create healthier,
Doesn't that
more
sound good?
prosperous societies.
Egyptians,
and higher
40% of them
living
live
standards
off
for
$1
all.
a day.
Socialists don't even know what capitalism is. They confuse capitalism with corporatism.
That's you.
Corporatism
You're confusing
is the opposite
matters,
of free
Matt.
market
Oligarchy,
capitalism,
yeah.
because it depends
Monopoly
on
power.
competition between well-connected large corporations.
Oh, money in
The
politics.
state.
Fantastic. Great to get to that one, please.
Constantly call for government to
All right, let's skip to. That's the point of one of the.
Look, capitalism
Jesus,
is by no
what-
means
the logic of altruism, right?
Still
I mean,
poverty in
healing
capitalist countries
baskets of
because
fish,
we don't live in a
bread.
utopia. We still live in a meritocracy where intelligence and hard work is rewarded with wealth. But even for those
But poverty causes brain damage.
fall behind,
Thanks for rewarding your hard work.
and provides a safety net via the welfare state, paid for by taxpayers as a result of wealth creation because of capitalism. America's poverty line for a family of 4 is $63 a day. In the poorest countries, which haven't embraced capitalism, it's $1.25.
Once again, no class analysis on property.
So by resisting capitalism, you're actually promoting an economic system that guarantees destitution and misery for
Preaching.
the most
This is very
amount
preachy,
of
isn't
people. You're supporting an ideology that ensures billions of people will continue to remain mired in poverty. So go back to your mom's basement.
Go back
Climate
to
change
your
has
mom's
been
basement.
great for
and
all kinds of-
genuflect.
Why are you wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt?
I'm not. I'm wearing a
But please,
basic shirt from
don't
Target.
inflict your colossally retarded hashtag on the rest of us.
Please,
Because
Matt,
you've
don't
got
do that.
no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Everything's fine, but just don't use the term retarded.
There's that.
Woo! I just threw out some eardrums. Whoa! My God.
I'm convinced. I'm sold. Sounds great.
They're just at the.
But
Jesus walks, on the water, healing. Yeah,
He does. Yeah.
this is the idea.
I saw him.
That we spread capitalism through the entire world, and
Saw him
everybody
down on,
everybody touches God there.
Hollywood Boulevard. Today. Yeah.
Wow, that is sick shit. That is, that
No. No. That's normal.
that's the real world.
Yeah, that's the real world.
That's sickness.
What you're saying on this fucking podcast is sick shit.
I'm in the margins of the abnormal.
Right. Yeah. You have no idea what you're talking about. Right? Because you are arguing for a system that's going to, cause abject poverty, ruin the world, right? There's only way we can have a prosperous world through capitalism. So,
And really,
I take it all back.
What's-
That's not in the poison pyramid.
what is deceptive and disgusting is the markets that they talk about are not connected to any discussion really of workers. Workers don't exist in any of those video clips. The labor that's produced from
workers aren't the hero.
Well, they're not.
Capitalism.
They're just things that happen behind the screen. I mean, it's the curtain between first class and third class in the airplane. They're putting the curtain up for a good reason, right? Because you don't actually talk about who's subsidizing who. And the other thing is, I think there's no discussion of the climate crisis, that we just will keep these markets growing and we'll keep this virus growing and it keeps eating away at the biosphere. But look how great this is. Well, what about the poverty that's created from climate change and climate damage, which is going to be just ripping up the sub-Saharan African regions and in some sense areas that are on the borders.
You're boring me.
Oh well,
But this is the thing, right?
Yeah.
shit's complicated. The world is complicated. And it can be tedious to try to, just to think about, analyze, to dissect, and or recognize or listen to somebody do a diagnosis of what's wrong with the world. That's boring.
No, and where is any mention, when this is the problem of this false notion that David Suzuki talks about, that they have these equations and that this charging ahead by using science to make markets exactly like science. Well, number one, when you're doing science, you have to account for everything. When you're talking about false causality, you have to try to minimize all of that. But capitalism ignores the causality aspects that are outside of its little equation. They're called externalities. So the earth, the harm that's created from to third-party actors that are caught between the buyer and seller. They just don't want to talk about the externalities. So somehow it's a science, but the earth isn't on that map.
Right. No. I mean, it's not part of what's important in the structure, right? The prime directive of the profit motive, right? Supply and demand, and the relationship of owners of capital and labor, right? The bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Like those are the ingredients that you're playing with, right? And fuck the environment.
Yeah.
Fuck the planet. That's not part of the, right? It's just to be eaten up.
Yeah. Just
so that whole relationship will work.
It's like that Anoni song, It's Only 4 Degrees, right? The great track from Anoni's album. It's no big deal. It's just 4-degree temperature change, right? Like, okay, well, technology will solve it. And this is what annoys the shit out of me for both liberals, capitalists, and general conservatives. This mindless obsession that somehow the technology will build new markets or new environments. And James Lovecock said, the environmentalist and thinker, that you need 5 planets for this.
Hey, and I would not, there's no denying that the technology that we're sitting with right now, like look at this studio, the microphones that we're using, and the iPad that I played the video on, and your iPhone that you have there, and the iPhone I have here, and the computer I have over there recording, like all of this technology
is wonderful.
Right. Yeah. Right. And of course, the efficiencies of the global capital marketplace have been a core part of how this all came to be.
This technology in the room,
but it's not.
This technology in the room is not being used to hurt people, but its production. It's the underneath its history of travel. There's been several wounds along the way.
But just because this is how we got the toys that we have today, it doesn't mean there isn't another way to make toys.
Yes. Yeah. Technology,
like the phone that you're, the iPhone that you're, tweeting your hashtag resist capitalism on wouldn't like okay, we get that, like these are the conditions that we live in and have lived in for the past 200 years, but we don't have to throw technology out the window.
And we don't have to pitch it in an essentialist way. So if you're an anarcho-primitivist, all this is about technology and it's all bad and we have to go back and rub mud on our chest. And in the same sense that right libertarians and caps or whatever, they say that technology is always good and it's going to save us. And we have some bad technology, but the newer technology coming out next month is even better and it'll wipe away the problems others. I mean, science and technology are neutral instruments. And so who's owning it? Who's using it? Who's making it? Who's funding it? Right? That's actually what ends up happening. So us using this technology here, this technology is being used for emancipation, but underneath it, the synthesizer, the keyboards, the mics, they have internal contradictions, which is that they came out of anti-democratic transactions.
Right. Yep.
I mean,
in many cases, probably inhumane transactions.
Yes. Right? Yeah. I mean, but this is I think this is the power of global neoliberalism, is that violence is off screen and you can't see it. When we bought products in the United States, the one thing that you knew is you actually knew how it was being made, and because your brother was making it in the factory.
Right. But the choice here doesn't have to be, so okay, what would you do?
Yeah.
Matt, the Marxist.
The clip that I get annoyed by the most is this anti-capitalist using her laptop, right? Which is this most absurd shit, which is, number one, just because I am using something that has harm in it doesn't mean that it can't be constructed for the future to reverse that harm. And there's direct and indirect forms of hypocrisy. I have no choice but to put gas in my car, even though I fucking hate the idea that I'm using dinosaur blood and skin and rotten plants of dead energy, dead sunlight to pump my car in like I'm a fucking prehistoric dinosaur. I have to use that to do this. So when people like Republicans or conservatives say, well, Al Gore, he has a mansion, and look at his energy consumption. I'm like, well, yeah, once again, I don't have a lot of love to spare for liberals, but still, I mean, there's something important to realize that you can be doing something bad that has bad actors in it, but that doesn't mean that what you're offering as a solution should be ignored because of it's the complicated origins of it. So
I mean, you doing something good that has bad actors.
Yeah, bad aspects. Yeah, exactly.
Of the production. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Even if like my grandparents in Alaska living totally off the grid and homesteading and like that's still part of the chain of consumption in small ways. Like, you know, it only like
they're going to eventually go to the hospital at some point.
They eventually went to the hospital. You eventually go and go to a big box store.
Every
go to
time
Costco
I interact with the markets, I'm told I'm a hypocrite.
Yeah,
I mean that's just childish.
So, and the thing I wanted to say is that it's not just a matter of total private control of global neoliberal capitalism versus totally state-run socialism. Like this isn't like the only options.
And you can talk to market anarchists or anarcho-socialists, anarcho-syndicalists that socialism or markets don't have to necessarily be about private concentration.
No,
fundamentally not.
I mean, Adam Smith introduced or the beginnings of thinking about capitalism as a functional economic system for powers in the world. He introduced this idea of the division of labor and different in value to different jobs, right? But if one job is harder, you pay more, and if it's not so hard, in that way somebody won't be jealous of the other one, right? Which is really about, again, I think is indicative of all of the thinking around capitalism, all of its core elements are about ideas and distrust in our fellow humans. Well, but imagine if that wasn't the shape of this economic system, right? Imagine if there was some other basis for the value of people's labor, like that really was something. Well, besides money.
And we'll talk about this on the Features of Mixtape, is actual solutions in transitioning out of an economic system based on deception, right? It's emotional core value
away
is
from
deception.
It is.
We're going to try to fleece each other, right? Yeah. That's essentially the buyer and seller are trying to rip each other off. And that's tragic that I'm going to say, God, I just ripped this person off. That's awesome. Well, why do we have that emotional feeling? I mean, that we think this is hilarious is that I got this for 30% off and I fucking ripped off Target or Kmart. Well, like, did I really? Because they set the price. I didn't get to set the price. If I ripped them off, then I bargained them to a lower price. But no, they set the price and then told me that I somehow got a great deal. Well, but I ripped them off. Well, yeah, they ripped off other people too. So, that 99-cent light that you got at the dollar store, well, some people are getting really ripped off. And why can't we have an economic system based on love? Because this isn't it. This is shit.
Based on love?
Based on love and compassion.
Oh, all right. That has love and compassion built into it. Right?
Solidarity.
That values,
an economic system of solidarity. So
but I don't know, what, are we going to have an economic system that trades in love?
Well, no, I'm not. But the emotional response that you feel.
I know what you mean, but I think you need to clarify.
Little cynic motherfucker. All right, so I'll give you an example of this. Right, little known, and if you talk to Marxists and Leninists and dyed-in-the-wool tankies or Maoists, you're not going to hear about this. But 1936, Barcelona got rid of Spanish currency, and Catalonia, but especially Barcelona, which was the most industrialized city in Spain, they created a time voucher system of stamps with potatoes, and they would dip them in a dye, and each workplace had its own local currency. So the unions that were very localized, there's delegate system within these larger mobilizations. And some of them weren't anarchists, but loved the feelings of democracy with these anarchist co-op structures. And you could cross the city of Barcelona with this potato stamp, right? And buy a pair of shoes, right? Now, this is the kicker here. Each of these time voucher stamps with potatoes imprints, they never saw this before. So the stamp, the print, the paper, they've never seen it, but they trust the person.
Right, it's about individual, trust.
Yeah,
Trust
there's no central currency, but they trust each other. That's a system of love.
But I think the thing you sort of glossed over there was that it was a time voucher.
Yeah, so time per work. So that becomes the notion, is because currency was viewed as corrupt, money is viewed as corrupt. So my time of labor, now of course it wasn't a 21st century notion of capitalism, because we could talk about empowering and disempowering labor like Michael Albert does in his book Paracon, Participatory Economics. But that if you were a farmer or working on the train system, or a collective, a factory or a restaurant, that your time was equally valued regardless of education, backgrounds or status or race or even gender. And some of these workplaces, union-based, CNT, FAI, they would bring someone to the workplace because they're unemployed. And people would say, okay, well, we'll work 3, 4, 5 hours less this week to make room for this worker. So they had full employment.
Right.
And then they'd have more productive capital. And what you saw again and again before Stalin fucked everything over, and the communists and the communist press, as George Orwell talked about in Homage to Catalonia, that this was growing and working, and that instead of having inefficiencies, there were hyper efficiencies. So farm equipment that was on one part of a land could be used on another farm, and it wasn't being hidden from the other farm. And the train system, because you were working from a bottom-up democracy of the workplace co-ops, the best ideas crowdsourced themselves through work, and they weren't shunted or silenced. And so employment increased, productivity increased, and you as a person had access to all of the same places that anyone else did. Right now, the LAX is building a luxury, thing, right? Like Elysium,
Big
except,
thing.
just a building, little satellite where you can get a back massage while you see the rest of the class strugglers put their luggage in, petroleum jets.
So to summarize, I think what you're trying to just illustrate a little bit is that there are alternatives that have been experimented with, that continue to be experimented with. There's a whole rich history of thinking about all things outside of this binary choice of between
false binary,
totally state-owned economies and totally, unfettered private monopolies, and that we're going to get into exploring some of those. Yes. And I think there's a lot that we didn't get to in this hour that we probably wanted to touch on capitalism, but the objective we wanted to hopefully accomplish here was to just place it in this context next to these two other sort of things, or more if we end up talking about more. But these out the gate things we know are not going to be useful for humanity in the future.
They'll have to be vastly reimagined as non-hierarchical structures.
Well, and probably not only or not merely vastly reimagined as is most of what, if we just reimagine capitalism. I'm very wary of all of these half attempts and pulled punches towards let's just reform. All of this sort of reformist talk about capitalism.
We'll definitely have a discussion about reform and revolution and the false binary of making those choices.
Exactly.
Right? That's another flaw of the left and people that want change.
Well, how does change even happen?
Anti-authoritarian cultures that we have this choice between reformism and revolution, which I think is incredibly childish, and we'll talk about that.
We better shut up, or we would just keep on going.
We're going to get to the third part of the poison pyramid, celebrity, for our next week's show,
and we'll return to all of these themes as we go.
The dark chambers of the poison pyramid.
But you may have noticed a few interruptions throughout. if I wasn't able to clean it up totally in the editing. But that's because we had a guest here in the studio today, and she was kind enough to record us an outro.
My name is Sakura, and I'm helping my dad with his podcast. And as a kid, I would like the future to be more advanced than right now. Advanced means many things. For instance, technology. And I don't think it's possible if people don't help and just, if people just don't do anything, to reverse global warming. Thank you. Goodbye.
So that was your daughter. How old is your daughter?
9. Her birthday's coming up soon.
What's she doing over there?
She's on the floor, sleeping on some type of bed material you made, blankets. So it's bones on board. So yeah. So
that was very sweet.
Yeah, scheduling mishaps, so we had to bring my daughter over here from Riverside to LA.
Well, she's wonderful.
Oh, I'm so glad you liked her.
Again, thanks to Sakura, and thanks for listening this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at thefuturismmixtape.com. You can also find Matt probably, on Facebook at facebook.com/thefuturismmixtape. Find us on Twitter. It's at Future Mixtapes. And if you want to record an outro when you send to us, we would very, very much love that. You can find the script along with the show notes for this episode on the website.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
See you next week.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for
child explosions of discomfort.